Have you ever walked past someone, barely noticing them, only to discover seconds later that they weren't just ordinary at all, but extraordinary beyond belief? That's exactly what happened inside the armory of Fort Ironclad one blistering afternoon, when a general realized too late that the quiet woman in the corner was not just another soldier cleaning her weapon. She carried a story written into a tiny badge on her chest, one that would make even the toughest military minds question what was truly possible. General Marcus Harlan was a man who thought he had seen it all. 28 years in the Army, combat deployments, endless tours, working side by side with Rangers, Green Berets, even sitting in blacked-out briefing rooms with the most classified units in existence. He prided himself on spotting talent, on knowing instantly which soldier was exceptional and which was just going through the motions. Yet that day, walking the polished concrete floors of the Fort Ironclad Armory with his aide, he almost missed her completely. The room buzzed with the sound of weapons being stripped, oiled, and reassembled. Rows of soldiers hunched over rifles, pistols, and machine guns, their hands moving in practiced rhythms. The air smelled of solvent, gun oil, and steel, familiar, almost comforting. And then, in the farthest corner of the room, nearly hidden behind stacked crates in a row of weapon racks, sat Staff Sergeant Aria Cortez. Her hands moved with meticulous precision over the heavy frame of a Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle, the kind of weapon designed not for ordinary firefights, but for impossible shots across valleys, deserts, and mountains. To most soldiers, the Barrett was a beast, a 30-pound monster with recoil that could knock the unprepared on their backs. But in Aria's hands, it looked like an extension of her body, something she understood down to its last screw and spring. Now here's where I pause to give you my own thought. People like Aria don't stand out in crowds. They blend in. They don't shout, don't posture, don't demand recognition. And that's what makes them dangerous. The quiet ones often carry the deadliest skills. General Harlan might have kept walking if his eyes hadn't drifted to the neat line of pins and patches on Aria's uniform. At first it was routine. Ranger tab, marksmanship badge, parachutist wings. But then he froze. His gaze locked on one particular insignia, so small it could have been overlooked, so unbelievable it nearly made him question his eyesight. 3,200 meters, confirmed kill. He muttered it aloud without realizing, his boots halting mid-step. His aide, Major Collins, almost bumped into him. "Sir?" General Harlan's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. No one makes a shot like that." Aria glanced up briefly, acknowledging the general with a calm nod, before returning to reassembling the Barrett. There was no arrogance, no attempt to justify herself, just quiet professionalism. That silence, if you ask me, was louder than any brag. Because real warriors, they don't need to talk. Their actions speak. But Harlan couldn't let it go. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over the weapon spread neatly across the mat. "Staff Sergeant Cortez," he said, his voice even but sharp. "Where did you get this badge?" "From my deployment, sir," she replied, her voice steady, low, almost understated. The shot was confirmed by multiple observers and mission command. Her tone carried no pride, no need to convince, just fact. And that shook him more than if she had boasted, because a lie usually comes wrapped in glitter. The truth often walks in quietly, carrying weight heavier than words. General Harlan had seen legends in the making, snipers hitting 1,500 meters, maybe a rare record close to 2,400. But 3,200? That wasn't just doubling the distance. That was rewriting the rules of physics, ballistics, even human capability. He glanced at Collins, who had already pulled out his tablet. "Major, pull up her record." Collins' fingers flew across the screen, accessing the personnel database. As he scrolled, his brows furrowed deeper and deeper. "Sir, this doesn't look like a standard file. Half of her service record is redacted, but the parts we can see," he exhaled, shaking his head. "She graduated sniper school, top of her class, attended advanced long-range courses, attachments with Rangers, JSOC support operations, and, sir, these notations reference units I've never even heard of. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always believed that when the military hides a file under black ink and locked doors, It usually means someone has done something the world isn't ready to talk about. And here was a soldier whose career looked like a classified puzzle. General Harlan leaned in closer. Cortez, I want to know exactly how someone makes a 3,200-meter shot. Aria placed the bolt carrier group down with delicate precision before meeting his eyes. Her calmness was unnerving, like she had stared through a scope at distances where most men couldn't even see a speck of dust. Sir, she said softly, it takes everything. Wind speed and direction across multiple layers, temperature gradients, air density shifts, spin drift, even the Coriolis effect, the Earth's own rotation. You calculate it all, you wait, and you trust patience more than you trust the trigger. Her explanation wasn't a boast. It was science spoken like poetry. And to me, listening to those words through this retelling, I feel goosebumps. Because here's the truth. Soldiers like her don't just pull a trigger. They bend reality itself for a fraction of a second. The general tried to mask his astonishment. You're telling me you maintained position long enough to account for all that? At that distance? Yes, sir, Aria replied. 4 hours. The environment had to be perfect. The target was stationary, the elevation differential provided opportunity, and conditions aligned. 4 hours, imagine that. Most people can't sit through a movie without fidgeting. She lay in one position, her mind sharper than any computer, waiting for a single shot that might never come. That's not just skill, that's discipline fused with obsession. Sir, Major Collins interjected, her records mention a classified operation in the Caucasus Mountains. Redacted mission details, but I'd bet that's where it happened. General Harlan's stare hardened. Cortez, I want to see it for myself. A demonstration. That's when her composure wavered for the first time. Sir, with respect, such demonstrations require authorization, range control, and safety protocols. Extreme distance engagements can't be improvised. I'll get authorization, Harlan snapped. We'll start with 1,200 meters. You'll show me. And that's when the real story began, the part where disbelief would collide with reality, where the general's skepticism would crumble under the thunderous crack of a Barrett rifle echoing across the range. But more importantly, it's where we, the audience, begin to see not just a sniper, but a human being carrying skills so rare, it changes the way even generals see warfare. Now let me pause again, because what fascinates me most isn't the rifle, the badge, or even the impossible distance. It's this. Greatness almost always hides in plain sight. The ones who are truly capable don't announce themselves. They're the ones in the corners, quietly cleaning their tools, preparing for a day when the world finally realizes who they really are. And that, my friends, is what makes Aria Cortez's story worth telling. Because sometimes history isn't written by speeches in boardrooms or medals on parade grounds. Sometimes it's written by a woman lying still for 4 hours, her breath steady, her mind calculating, her finger waiting for the one perfect second to squeeze a trigger and change everything. 2 mornings later, the air at Fort Ironclad's extended range was thick with anticipation. It wasn't every day that a general demanded to see a sniper's skills firsthand, and word had already spread through the base. Soldiers lined the observation platform, whispering and nudging one another. Some were curious. Others were skeptical. After all, legends like 3,200 meters often sounded more like campfire tales than reality. General Marcus Harlan stood with his aide, Major Collins, binoculars slung around his neck. His jaw was set, as though daring the soldier to prove him wrong. But behind that steel expression was something else, something I can't help but recognize in men like him. Curiosity. When the world tells you a thing is impossible, part of you wants to watch someone try. Staff Sergeant Aria Cortez was already at the firing line, her Barrett .50 laid out on the mat like a surgeon's scalpel. The weapon gleamed under the sun, every inch spotless from hours of care. She had spent the morning calibrating her scope, checking her ballistic computer, and taking meticulous readings of the weather. Unlike the crowd buzzing around the range, she was silent, her mind locked into a rhythm of calculation. General, she said, her voice steady when he approached. Target is at 1,200 meters. Environmental factors have been logged. I'm ready when you are. Harlan gave a curt nod. Proceed. And here's where I want to pause as a narrator, because 1,200 meters may not sound like much if you've never been behind a rifle. But let me tell you, that's 3/4 of a mile. Most shooters can't hit consistently at 300. Even skilled snipers call anything beyond 800 stretching it. At 1,200, the bullet's flight time is almost 2 full seconds. Anything, a gust of wind, a twitch of muscle, can change the outcome. Aria settled into position. She adjusted her bipod, checked the bubble level to make sure the rifle was perfectly aligned, and then began her breathing cycle. Deep inhale, slow exhale, pause. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, not pressing, not trembling, just waiting. The Barrett thundered. A shockwave rippled across the range. Dust kicked up around her as the .50 caliber round screamed across the distance. Soldiers instinctively flinched, even with ear protection. Seconds later, the range safety officer's voice cut through the silence. "Impact! Center mass!" Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. General Harlan raised his binoculars and confirmed it himself. The target, a steel silhouette, bore a fresh hole dead in its chest. Aria didn't move. She worked the bolt, chambered another round, recalculated. This time she adjusted her aim slightly for shifting wind. Again, the rifle cracked. Again, the bullet landed within inches of the first. By the fifth shot, all 5 rounds had clustered tight enough that the range officer whistled low. Group size, under 10 inches, at 1,200 meters. That's unreal. Now here's my commentary. You could see the shift happen in the crowd. Skepticism gave way to awe. Soldiers who had whispered doubts now stood in stunned silence. And General Harlan, his lips pressed thin, his binoculars slowly lowering, realized that what he was seeing wasn't luck. It was mastery. He stepped closer to her. "Impressive, but you're telling me you can triple that distance? What you just did at 1,200? At 3,200? Aria calmly began unloading her rifle. "Yes, sir. With proper conditions, yes." "Conditions," Harlan echoed, almost to himself. 4 hours, mountains, weather aligned." He shook his head. "I want to see it." "Sir, this installation can't support that range," Major Collins reminded. "We'd need an external site, likely classified facilities." But the general wasn't listening. His mind was racing. For decades, warfighters had relied on drones, artillery, technology. But here was a human, one woman, capable of delivering a single shot across distances that defied reason. He wasn't just impressed. He was unsettled. Because if someone like Aria existed on his side, what if someone like her existed on the other? Later that evening, in the officers' quarters, Harlan couldn't stop replaying what he'd seen. I imagine he must have stared out his window into the dark, wondering how a world of satellites and jets could still depend on something as raw, as primal, as a sniper lying in the dirt with a rifle. And honestly, that thought gives me chills. Because here's the thing, technology can fail, batteries die, satellites get jammed, but discipline, patience, and a human being who has trained her body into a weapon, that doesn't short circuit. That doesn't power down. That endures. And for General Harlan, watching Aria Cortez calmly dismantle her Barrett after proving her point, it was the first crack in his long-held belief about the limits of human capability. He hadn't just witnessed a demonstration. He'd witnessed the edge of what was possible. But he had no idea that soon he'd be pulled into a mission where her impossible shot would no longer be theory. It would be the only option. 3 months later, the desert night was alive with radio chatter. General Harlan was aboard a forward operations command vehicle. Headset pressed to his ear as words like hostage, compound, no entry possible echoed through the line. The situation was dire. A high-value terrorist leader had taken captives in a mountain stronghold. Satellite imagery showed fortified walls, overlapping kill zones, no safe approach. Every traditional plan, airstrike, ground assault, risked killing the hostages. That's when a familiar name cut through the noise. Recommendation, deploy Cortez, extreme range precision option. Harlan's breath caught. Aria. Within an hour, she was flown in under the cover of night, her Barrett packed in a heavy case. She moved with calm focus, eyes scanning the terrain as if reading a language no one else understood. The team briefed quickly. The target would occasionally step onto a balcony overlooking the valley. No drone could linger without being detected. No assault team could scale the cliffs without alerting guards. The only chance was one shot. And the distance? 3,200 meters? When I tell you the air inside that command vehicle felt suffocating, believe me, every officer present knew what was at stake. A miss meant death for the hostages. A hit meant a miracle. Aria, meanwhile, didn't flinch. She set up her rifle on an outcropping overlooking the valley. She anchored herself, bipod legs dug deep, body flat against the rock. For hours, she lay motionless, monitoring wind, pressure, temperature shifts. She barely blinked. "Target emerging," whispered the spotter through comms. The man stepped onto the balcony, flanked by guards. He laughed, oblivious to the fact that death itself watched him from nearly 2 miles away. Aria adjusted her scope, her breathing slowing to near nothing. The world narrowed. No desert, no command vehicle, no chatter. Just her rifle, and one silhouette bathed in faint moonlight. She exhaled, her finger curled. The Barrett roared. Seconds passed, agonizingly slow. Then over comms. "Target down." Confirmed. Clean shot. Hostages secure. Chaos erupted in the command vehicle. Cheers, disbelieving laughter, raw relief. But General Harlan, he just sat there stunned, because he realized he had just witnessed history. Not theory, not rumor, reality. And here's where I give you my honest thought. Greatness often reveals itself in the quietest ways. That night, Aria Cortez didn't strut, didn't boast. She simply packed her rifle, nodded once, and melted back into the shadows. To her, it was just another mission. But to everyone else, it was proof that the limits of human skill were far beyond what they had ever dared believe. Weeks later, Harlan sat in a classified debrief with higher command. A senior officer leaned across the table. "General, what you saw was not just a shot, it was a reminder. We don't advertise soldiers like Cortez. They are strategic assets. When the world says impossible, they quietly prove otherwise. And that, my friends, is what sticks with me. Because while we cheer the spectacle of drones and jets, the real game changers might be the ones sitting silently in corners, polishing their rifles, carrying badges that tell stories most of us can't even imagine." Aria Cortez wasn't just a sniper. She was a reminder that sometimes one calm, disciplined human being can hold the fate of nations in her steady hands. So next time you pass someone without a second glance, ask yourself, what hidden battles might they already have fought? What quiet badges do they carry? Because the general learned that day, in the shadow of a Barrett .50, that extraordinary skill can hide in the plainest of places, waiting for the one impossible moment when the world finally needs it.